So, welcome as people come in. We're up to 40 here. Please put your hello messages into the chat. It's lovely to see people from all over the place here. So I'm James Mountford, dialed in from home in the middle of a very sunny London. It'll be probably dark by the end of this. And so we've got Hester from darkest Hampshire. What do you mean by darkest Hampshire? That's my home county. We've got Boston, we've got California, we've got sunny Inverness. And Nikki's here, I think, so we've certainly got New Zealand as well. Do we have Luke? We do. Wonderful.
I exist, James. Yeah.
Wonderful. I've been scanning down, and I missed you. It's situational unawareness. So let me briefly introduce Luke and Hannah and Amanda, and I'll and the topic and the emphasis for me on briefly, just to welcome here people, especially for the first time who are coming, but welcome everyone to this third Thursday, or for people in the Australasian part of the world, third Friday. What we tend to do is we have a topic which is introduced by one or more people, and that topic somehow relates to kindness. And we hear a little bit about it. We might have some questions after the topic's been introduced, and then we go into breakouts. And we try and do that for a really good chunk of time, 20 minutes or so, to have a proper discussion about a question or two that we offer. The breakouts are not facilitated. We don't formally report them out. You can obviously talk about whatever you want. And then we come back into the main group to just take some points that transpired. So that's our format. That's what we're doing tonight. That's what we usually do. It's my job to make sure that I hand over to Bob no later than 6:58 British time for some group notices and a look ahead to April. But other than that, we're ready to go. And Amanda, I'm going to start with you. So Amanda and I worked together 4 or 5 years ago, and I was always struck by Amanda's, let's say, deep thoughtfulness. And then I discovered that she had a PhD in psychology. And we caught up again after a bit of a gap last year. And we were just talking about stuff. And Amanda introduced me to this concept of organisational peace, which is our topic this evening. And I'll let Amanda and Luke and Hannah say more about that. But it's a really, really fascinating topic. And what I just want to say one thing about the topic. So what I hadn't thought of was this concept of violence in health care and in health, and about what the opposite of peace is. And I think we're going to go there during our conversation tonight. So that's Amanda. Amanda introduced me to Hannah and Luke. And I think it's the first time, I think I can say this with great confidence, it's the first time that we have had Luke is a conflict dynamics specialist. So I don't think we've ever had a conflict dynamics specialist hold our issue before. And Hannah is a comms specialist, really, working in communication and marketing. When we met before, you told me about Harley Davidson. Fascinating. But Amanda and Luke and Hannah have been thinking about organisational peace in various contexts, including healthcare. And thank you to the trio of you for sharing some thoughts with us this evening. So I think, Amanda, that we start with you. So, Amanda.
We do, yeah. Thank you, James, for that introduction. Very much appreciated. And thanks for having us here. I'm looking forward really to what comes out of the discussion groups later. I wanted to start actually with a couple of acknowledgements, caveats, depending on how you frame them. First, that it's been a tough week, especially for those in the English healthcare system, and maybe for many who are joining today, feeling hurt by decisions that have been made, and particularly the way those decisions have been taken. So in many ways, it feels like this conversation has come at a really good time, but I'm also very conscious it's come at a very tender time for people. And so that's very present for me in sort of introducing this topic today. So with that in mind, I also want to just acknowledge that this could be a very challenging topic, as we talk about, as James just alluded to, the harms that are sometimes done in the name of care, and the violence that can sometimes take place in the name of care. And for both of those reasons, I think it's important, and I really hope that we can introduce this with great gentleness and have a conversation where we are very gentle with each other. And so that's my intention. I hope that you receive that too. And finally, just to say that Luke, Hannah and I, we're really very early on in our inquiry into this idea about organisational peace. It's something that we're very interested in, and look, and what it means for organisational system change. We've done a lot of chatting. That's what we've done a lot of chatting, and lots of enthusiastic conversations. But this is the first time we've sort of presented our ideas together. So thank you for letting us build in the open and helping us with that. This really is just a very sort of a small introduction to some of the things we've been thinking about. So we're going to try and be clear and simple and not get too carried away in the discussion. So I hope we manage to do that. This I'm going to share. This is my only slide. It's my only slide. If you can see it, can we see? So this is from a fantastic show called Alma's Not Normal that I really highly recommend you all watching if you haven't seen it already. This is Lynn, Alma's mum, saying they can hide a lot of cruelty in the word policy, Alma. So Alma's mum, Lynn, is an inpatient in a secure psychiatric hospital. And the scene where Lynn says this, every day Alma brings Lynn her bits. This is the stuff that Lynn has requested that she needs to get by, the stuff that she needs to feel joy or to feel comfort. Every day Alma brings her a carrier bag of her bits, and every day all of Lynn's bits are confiscated, because that's the policy, that she can't have them. And her response to this is this fantastic line of, they can hide a lot of cruelty in the word policy, Alma. And like Alma, I grew up caring for a parent with serious mental illness. And perhaps because of that, I experienced a lot of cruelty in the name of healthcare, possibly more than most. And maybe because of that, I continue to be attuned or have the eyes to see cruelty in healthcare, and maybe where it's a bit more subtle as well. And I think particularly the most cruel parts, the least kind parts, are where it is policy, not just an unkind word or somebody being thoughtless, but kind of designed in. So I thought I should probably give you some examples of that. And so these have come to mind, some today, some in the past, but thinking of things like visiting hours policies that make it impossible for patients to see their family members, treatment policies that can force invasive diagnostics against patients' better judgments, more for staff, annual leave policies that separate caring professionals from their loved ones at key moments, lone worker policies that transfer risk that's deemed unbearable by their large organisation onto the shoulders of single volunteer carers at home. I've seen security policies in emergency departments preempt the potential of frustration from complex individuals who are probably suffering the most in our society and turn their health problem into a crime as soon as they walk in the door. We see a lot of informal policies that get blue tack to notice boards, making sure that the other team doesn't use the wrong toilets or sit in the wrong chair or make use of the wrong parts of the kitchen. And even bigger, we have funding policies that keep certain services continually in a state of precarity, supposedly in order to show probity or responsibility. And on the flip side of that, the greatest kindnesses I feel like I've seen in the healthcare system in both my professional life and personally have been when individuals bravely take responsibility for not following a policy, when they bend the rules and advocate or look the other way, or even just when leaders bother to do their homework so that they can speak with authority that such policies aren't needed or aren't a real solution. So what's all this got to do with conflict and peace, and how do we get to organisational peace? Well, I've come to the belief that these cruel policies, these designed in violences, really, they have become a feature in our organisations or our healthcare partnerships due to a kind of pathological avoidance of addressing conflict. Underlying each of these cruel policies and the issues around them are reasonable expected needs that are at odds, but that don't get a chance to be acknowledged or properly understood or worked through. And I feel very passionately that within healthcare, we need to start to be able to respond to conflict more actively, in good faith, and with the expressed intention of resolving it without violence. And this is what I mean when I talk about organisational peace, and particularly in healthcare. And I've been really blessed, really, to talk with Luke and Hannah and other colleagues from restorative practice and peace education backgrounds, and hear their wisdom around these issues and to sort of make sense of that. So I want to hand over to Luke now, and ask him if he can give us some language, some concepts from the worlds of conflict resolution to help us discuss how we navigate conflict in healthcare.
Sure, thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. I'm going to preface what I'm about to say, which is conflict is contextual, bearing in mind the amount of people from different parts of the world that are here today. So I think just to kind of give you a Venn diagram, if you think about the overlap of conflict, violence, and peace, and when can you have conflict without violence, and when can you have violence without conflict? And often these two things are intertwined. But from my kind of perspective as someone who's interested in conflict resolution, conflict can actually be a very healthy part of organizational culture, as long as you can then transform it into peace. So one of the things that fascinates me within kind of the healthcare profession and other institutional settings is what gets weaponized to cause harm. How does language, how do policies, behaviors get weaponized against either other teams, as Amanda kind of alluded to, patients, or to other healthcare providers? And I think within that weaponization, the British are very passive aggressive. So it won't come out in the way you think. So one of the things to think about is, when is conflict hidden as opposed to when is conflict suppressed? And that distinction does not equal peace in either setting. So going back to the Venn, the weaponization through violent means, if you like, may not be intentional, but it is there. And at other times, people deliberately mean to cause harm. And, you know, what are the kind of the nuclear options that people can use when they're weaponizing language, processes, and policies against people? And then I think when we're thinking about this idea of organizational peace, I've also worked in prisons, and the guys have often said, well, isn't peace boring because nothing happens? And I'm like, no, actually, peace is a dynamic state that enables other things to happen. So I don't want you to have, or I would recommend not having peace as an end state, but as part of a dynamic process. And to have that dynamic process, we need language that will support it. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah now, if I may.
Thank you very much, Luke. So I'm going to talk about three things that stand out to me when I think about actively dealing with conflict. I'm going to talk about non-violent communication. I'm going to talk about everyday peace indicators, and I'm going to talk about quantum mechanics. I know I have a short amount of time before Amanda looks at me. I'm speaking to you as a transdisciplinary researcher, a change communication specialist, and also a Quaker. Non-violent communication teaches us that we can achieve peace through empathy. So connection is the primary intention rather than control or compliance. The practice helps you move through these different stages, from judgments and observations about the situation to emotions that you might feel, to identify your needs. You then move on to empathise with others. So you're looking at their judgments, their feelings and their needs, before then looking at actions that you can take. So for example, if I'm in a situation where I'm annoyed that I get talked over during meetings by a bunch of guys, okay, I'm sure it's never happened to you. So you start with the judgments, and the judgments are blaming and shaming, and that's super important to acknowledge and recognise and name, because we all have these judgments in us. So my judgments might be that these men are misogynists who can't abide a strong woman speaking up. Or the judgment could be about me, and actually I always dither when I speak, so maybe I'm not getting my point across. So no wonder no one listens to me. So they're equally as destructive, but very important that we can voice them. So then my feelings are, I feel frustrated, I feel angry. My needs are, I think, I need time to think and speak uninterrupted. I then look at them, the people who are doing me this harm, and their observations might be they think that I do get my point across and that everyone's just allowed to pipe up when they want to in a meeting. They may think I'm fine with it. They may think that I don't make my point quick enough and that they fear that they won't be heard. So their needs may be also that they need more time to speak and think uninterrupted. So then we move on to strategy and requests. And in this situation, it could be that we need to overhaul how meetings are done. And then we can look at how our needs can be met there. So non-violent communication uses empathy to help us take responsibility for our own emotions and needs instead of blaming and judging, and taking responsibility for our own emotional response to the situation and people. This is being proactive about achieving peace, which doesn't mean avoiding conflict at all costs. We also need to understand that peace is subjective and contextual, as Luke touched on. And this one of everyday peace indicators come into this. And I first heard about the concept of everyday peace indicators at an event run by Luke and his friend Terence at a restorative justice event in Cambridge last year. And that's also where I met Amanda. Looking back at my notes from that day, I saw that I'd written, the everyday matters and determines the quality of your life. And I don't know if that's a quote from you, Luke, but I'd underlined it and it was obviously very profound for me. And in the workshop, we were asked to write down what indicates in your daily life that peace has been achieved. And I think I wrote something about my dog or something, but it was interesting because everybody had something different. And it made me think when I was preparing for this talk that I have a friend who is a fellow Quaker. She's currently in the West Bank, working as an ecumenical accompanier. And her job is simply to walk children to school over this mountainous terrain. And they try and teach her Arabic and then they laugh at her pitiful attempts. If they're not being accompanied, they wouldn't go to school, because without her, they would have to walk by the road where they would be chased by teenagers with guns. So peace to these children is just a chance to be able to walk unharassed. I was talking to another friend who's a widow and a mother of three, living in Blackpool. And I said to her, what would the everyday peace indicator be for you? And I quote, she said, sitting in my bed reading with a hot coffee, knowing that my children are happy and healthy and safe at home with me. So it's all very different. So what are the indicators in your life, your communities? What about work? Where are the indicators of violence at work? As Amanda was alluding to, that passive aggressive note, that policy that ensures equality but not equity. In my last remaining minute, I'm going to talk about quantum mechanics. Full disclosure, I don't know very much about quantum mechanics, but I do know the fundamental concept is that light can behave as both a wave and a particle, depending on the context. And there's something really empowering and reassuring about this bothness in this increasingly polarized world. We're constantly told by politicians and the media, you're either with us or against us, but that isn't the only choice we have. Peace is not a zero-sum game. My peace doesn't mean that you will experience violence. My peace doesn't cancel out your peace, even if we have conflicting views. So to conclude, you can address conflict through the pursuit of connection by identifying your judgments, emotions and needs, and then empathizing to understand the judgments, emotions and needs of others. The second point, remember that peace is subjective, contextual, and resides in the everyday as it determines the quality of your life. And 3, peace and polarization don't go well together. You don't need to take sides. There's a lovely Quaker expression, think it possible that you might be mistaken. Ask questions, empathize, come to conflict from a place of love. I'm going to end with a Gandhi quote because it seems very fitting today. Gandhi said, it isn't enough to talk about peace, one must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it, one must work at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. James, we have some questions for the discussion groups. Would you like me to? I did do a slide with them written on, if that's helpful, or we can just say them or put them in the chat.
As you wish. Maybe popping them in the chat would be a good idea.
Okay, all right. So
that was just from all of you, absolutely fantastic. My mind is racing, and Hannah, I've just popped in the chat. Others would have heard this already. The former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, did a wreath lecture in December 22, and the central thing I took from it was be less certain and be more curious about why other people might hold beliefs just as sincerely and strongly as you, even if you find them, bizarre or abhorrent. You made me think of that. Thank you. Amanda, do you have the questions?
I've just put them in the chat.
Oh, you put them in the chat.
So our suggested questions are what might be the unresolved conflict that's underlying a long-standing challenge in your setting? Does it work to use this idea of reframing some of these long-standing challenges as a conflict, and what might be the unmet needs that are in that conflict? And then what would you notice is different if those needs were met, thinking about those everyday peace indicators that Hannah was talking about? And would that be peace? So those are our suggested questions. We'd be very interested in people coming back with them.
So on a super practical nature, as Bob gets ready to whisk us off into groups, you might want to just copy those questions so that you can have them to hand in the group. So it's now 6:25. I suggest, Bob, at 6:44 or 6:45, you bring us back, but give us our 20 minutes in the groups. And I make a confident prediction that every group will not run out of things to talk to, given the stimulus that we've just had.
Perfect. Wonderful stuff. So 1:45 the hour. Remember, we've got all sorts of hours here. 1:45 the hour, we'll come back. I will. I'm going to try and do a little bit of technical prowess and make sure that those questions are in everybody's little group chat. But we're going to keep the groups pretty small, I think, sort of 4s and 5s and 6s. Let's let Teams do its wonderful thing. As I always say, put your safety belts on or whatever. It takes about 10 seconds to get in the room. And if you get lost, and it all goes wrong, leave the meeting, rejoin, and I will be waiting for you with a warm welcome in the main room, which tends up being a bit of a renegade group. Right, I'm going to press the button. Have an amazing time. See you in 20 minutes.
Thanks, Bob. Hello.
Hello. Right, there's a last few people who I think are moving across. Right, well, welcome everyone. Lucy, there's obviously something about your, I don't know, profile or connection or something refuses to go into breakout groups. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
Katharina, hello. Sanjeev, hello.
I'm stuck on mute.
Ranjit, hello. Right, come on then, guys. Listen, we've got like a ready-made group here. This is very perfect. Come on, I'm going to quiet myself down. It'd be lovely to hear what you were all thinking about. Lucy, if you wrestled yourself off mute, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. It immediately made me think in my setting about, I'm in our executive team, about different kind of power bases and also different conflicts between what's most important between different people's portfolios that plays out a lot, but not in a sufficiently kind of surfaced way. So there's a lot of unmet need in that for, I think, control, success, and or a lot of fear underlying kind of I think there's a lot of fear under people's what's the kind of positions that people in the team take about, you know, what does it mean for me and my job if my bit fails? I think that's what actually sits underneath it. And it would be so helpful if we felt safe enough to surface it in a kind of way that was centered around resolution. At the moment, it plays out, but it doesn't always feel safe enough to kind of discuss the stuff that's all underneath the surface. That's immediately what it made me think.
Right. Thanks so much, Lucy. Let's resonates in lots of ways, and I've got loads of follow-on questions. But let's hear from some others. Sanjeev, come on, can I haul you into where's your brain in on this? And I guess there's a bit, as I'm also thinking about, you know, what we're teaching people about how people are learning in and around the space. How do we build a future workforce that where maybe this is not necessarily easier to do, but it's maybe more prevalent.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because this sort of human response to conflict is one of pain and agony, and that comes out either as defensiveness and aggression, or an acceptance that actually engaging with conflict through dialogue and narrative is a healthy response. And we don't, I think, adequately support people to take on the latter. But we end up in these conflictual, adversarial situations in the former, and then everyone runs because that conflictual situation has just de-escalated to all sorts of sort of formal processes. And and actually, how does one kind of sort of not let go of conflict, but actually undertake conflict in the context of dialogue and narrative? That, I think, is probably the most important thing. I've actually earlier on this week, I've just had a conversation with a very young senior leader to say, can you come and please talk to our medical students about how to engage in conflictual issues, but in a way that generates win-win situations through dialogue and narrative. And that's going to be an interesting exercise, because we're going to create some scenarios that allow us to engage our student body in a discussion about how to do it. And if you're a junior doctor, things like, well, my wife is in the Midlands and I'm in London, comes across as a good one. Or I've done 24 hours straight and now I'm being asked to do another 24 hours. So it's how do we create those win-win scenarios, but not avoid the issues themselves, which clearly need to be engaged with. I've got a colleague at work who's currently going through all sorts of emotional spasms because I'm trying to deal with their behavioural issues, but they're so guarded and defensive, and I can't help but it rubbing off on me as well. So I've got to manage my own emotions in all of this. So it's a really challenging kind of sort of conversational piece here about what is conflict and how do you manage it successfully.
Yeah, and some super interesting stuff there, Matt. The impact on yourself. And Len Berry, who often joins the calls, in his beautiful paper about kindness in improving outcomes with patients with cancer, sort of touches on this idea about how can you be empathetic when you've got things flying at you. And there's some funny things going on. As you're talking, both you and Lucy have got me thinking about tribes. We don't have to do this weird. I mean, come on, Lucy, we've got a lovely, for Sanjeev and Ranjith and me, we've got this, ops manager on the call now here to, lob and forget, rotten tomatoes at. I mean, bricks at would be some of the behaviours that we see, and indeed, lots of us on this call have management roles. There's something weird we do, isn't it? In the sort of protection of our tribes, we sort of create these conflicts: doctor versus nurse, consultant versus GP, manager versus. I find it really weird, and it just sort of, the psychology doesn't add up. Ranjith, come on in and let's hear from you.
Sorry, Bob. I missed the initial bit. So we are talking about conflict and.
Yeah, and there's some questions that we're talking, that's right, about conflict in the concept, in the sort of framing of peace. So Amanda asked these questions: what might be the unresolved conflict that underlies a long-standing challenge in your setting? What could be the unmet need that's in that conflict, and what would you notice is different if those needs were met? Would that be peace? Is a rather wonderful question.
That's a really good question. As it is something which in our setting where we work in very teams with diverse cultures, and there is also neurodiversity, which makes things harder when people are so different and stuck in their ways. And I have some occasions found conflict to be positive. In fostering growth and development and getting everything out on the table, and sometimes when you avoid it completely, the actual issues are never dealt with. So I think it is how you use it and how you see it. As in, it can be turned into a positive where you can bring everything out on the table and have a healthy discussion, and where both parties or the number of parties involved can resolve their issues and find some commonality. I sometimes feel it's not as negative as it is deemed to be. It can be positive.
Listen, what about a pediatric piece here on siblings? I don't know you guys well enough to know whether you have siblings, but I do, and professionally also I love getting into conversations with children, young people I'm looking after about their siblings and their relationships. I just wonder there whether there's something we can learn, because I don't think it's just me. There's a deep set of love across my siblings, but that's been the biggest area in my life of conflict over years, over, you know, who sits in which bit of the table, you know, take your pick. The list is long. I'm getting smiles from people.
I think it's the
come on in.
closer.
What do you think?
The closer you are, you know, the expectations are going to be high, and you're going to be affected more as well, even small things. And the more you know, distant you are in your relationship, things might affect you less. So actually, you know, this can be a sign of how much you love each other and how close you are. So you know, because if there is no closeness or love, there won't be much of a, you know, fight or argument or conflict. I don't know.
It's super interesting. Sanjeev, come back in.
Yeah, as you talk about it, the more I think about it, the more I think to myself, actually, what we've managed to do is to make a conflict in the workplace about as far removed as can be from what happens in real life outside of the workplace. So you have systems and processes, you have all sorts of rules and regulations, you have descriptions and prescriptions for the way conversations should happen, which look totally unlike normal human interaction in the real world. And I suspect that actually we've made our lives much harder for ourselves because of all the HR processes that have sort of come into play. And it's interesting, you know, we can't actually even build trust in the workplace in the way that we might even do so with our family, because it's just alien to the workplace culture now that we are currently in.
Yeah. Well, interesting. I'm amused as well. It's like, I've just, you know, rhetorical question. What does the H stand for in HR? You know, don't even answer the question. Lucy, come on in, and then Bishan, it'd be lovely to see your smiling face. It'd be great to bring you in after Lucy.
With the sibling bit, I kind of think sibling conflict or sibling rivalry. Because I suppose I kind of think, you know, isn't sibling rivalry kind of inherently? I mean, I don't know if paediatricians you've been.
Lucy, what about executive rivalry to your?
Oh God, body? Well, yeah.
I guess
definitely.
I wonder, you know, is it the same word? I don't know.
I mean, I suppose, yeah. I mean, frankly, the older I get, the more I realise we absolutely are all the children inside, the children that, you know, with all our unmet needs from childhood and playing out a lot of. You know, to just give it, you know, playing out a lot of school stuff. I mean, and you see on the world stage, look at, you know, just look at our world leaders behaving like absolute school children. But yeah, I mean, we literally in the team I'm in had a whole thing about, we're doing a course together and there's coursework, but everybody's calling it homework and getting all stressed about, you know, and I kind of had to say, I think a lot of us are getting triggered because, you know, the kind of students, you know, we would have been when we were at school. You know, should we call it by the adult name, what we're doing here, not start using kid names for what we're doing, just to try and bring us out of, anyway.
It's really interesting. Bishop, we've got 5 more minutes, guys, 4 or 5 minutes before people come in. Come on in if you are hoping mics and things work.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. Look, loving the discussion. Actually, I think one thing that comes to mind is as an unmet need, I think, is that the human need for like personal acknowledgement and connection. And I think that's something when there's conflict, often I find that if we actually are able to be present enough to listen to what someone's saying, that's half the battle. So, I mean, I've listened to some stuff just recently, powerful podcast by, I don't know if you know, Rangan Chatterjee, and he interviewed a child psychiatrist. So interesting, you mentioned the pediatric perspective, and it was about, he's a specialist in attachment behavior. And it was talking about safety, being soothed, and be seen. So being seen, like, to me, this is the thing. Hello, my name is Bishan, and, you know, I'm, you know, Australian, and, well, I'm a New Zealander and living in Sweden, you know, and then knowing who other people are. I think the hello, my name is massive. And in conflict, I think just acknowledging what's going on for the other person. And I do agree that conflict is a real opportunity. I just had a chat to someone about that who was trying to talk about a patient interaction, and I said, just go in there and just say, I want to check in with you.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Rich Frankel, I don't know whether you were there, Bishop, a few months ago. Rich did. He's a physician, retired physician, but he's on this call actually, and he ran a beautiful session from a patient perspective, and he was telling us, doctors in particular, but managers and other staff, put a bit of yourself out there. Tell us who you are. Tell us, tell me a bit about you. I'm trying to, I want to create the sense of trust and tell you about my life, but it makes it so much easier if I know that you love football and you support this team, or you grew up you live in Sweden, or whatever the story, a bit of life,
it's connection.
Yeah.
Us the trust.
Yeah. Human connection. Yeah, beautiful stuff. Listen, we've got a couple more minutes. Let's hear anyone else got anything else they want to do, and I will do the odd little message out to people on things. There's something you're talking about, unmet need. I mean, I'm not sure my language on this is very. Maybe it's a bit loaded, but a lot of people where I've found particularly unkind and difficult, and at times awful behavior, the diagnosis underneath it is their own issues with self-esteem. And so there are people who need, my phrase is, quite a lot of stroking, to your point of the childlike, the sort of reassurance, and there's some it does make you wonder about sort of wider interventions, and I guess the leadership bit that starts with self and insight and self-awareness and things. But I don't know whether that triggers any final thoughts. I'm going to put a little message out to everybody, say they've got 1 more minute. Come on, Sanjeev, come on in.
I think the word that comes to mind is self-care, Bob, because the consequences of tackling childlike behavior in an adult in the workplace are very, very complex and messy.
Yeah.
And actually, the risk is that you start mirroring the childlike behavior of the person that is projecting, and that you can only overcome that by caring for yourself, and that's pretty fundamental to successful resolution of workplace conflict.
I say that filling your cup, you have to fill your cup to be able to handle that kind of conflict regularly, I think.
Perfect. And I'm smiling and thinking about what's going on in the global world around things, and I guess the challenge for political leaders to challenge some of that, but in quite an adult way. Right, let me get everybody back. Just giving everyone a warning, because otherwise it's a bit brutal. Right, and let's close those rooms. We'll see how that. We'll see. We get the smooth bit here. We just got a load of people come join us.
Okay.
Welcome back, everybody.
Well, I have to apologise because I clearly missed the cue to join the breakout room, which is why I was hearing two sets of people. So sorry, I kind of.
That's all right. Don't worry. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Most importantly, I can see Amanda's smiling face, which is good. James, and I've lost my lovely friend James somewhere. He's going to give me a. There he is. Magnolia's in the background. James, back to you, and I'll leave you guys to facilitate your way through the next 13-14 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. You at least in our group, you did a very unusual thing, which was Kath had just got to the end of an important sentence, and you came back then rather than cruelly ripping someone out mid-phrase. So thanks for that. So look, what we do now is we spend 10 or so minutes just sharing observations or questions. you can put your electronic hand up, or you can just start speaking. And Amanda, Luke, and Hannah, we might come to you for reflections, and I would like to come to each of you for a closing word. So just to alert you to that. Fred, thank you. Go ahead.
So I'll just jump in for our group. I think there's a sense that there might be a space before conflict where there's a difference of opinion, and could that be expressed in a calm, empathic way and not get to conflict? Because I was saying, I think of the word conflict in kind of negative terms, and I even looked it up in the dictionary, and it is negative. It's confrontive. And Nikki in our group was one that worked with, done much more work on this, and said that there is a space before conflict where people can disagree. So I think that was one of our issues. And the other issue was we agreed that the world's status now, with all the conflict around us, makes it more difficult on all of us. And we just have to be kind and gentle with each other and ourselves as best as we can.
Fred, sorry, I'm intrigued. Like, what characterizes this pre-conflict room or phase, and how do we recognize it, and what should we do when we find ourselves there?
Well, I was just thinking, for example, in the introduction when it was mentioned a woman feeling a little out of place with a conference of mostly of all men, and could she speak up? Would she be heard? Can there be a way to deal with that issue without getting into a conflict over it? And I think there is. Simply raising your hand, speaking up. In other words, I think we can speak up for our point of view, whatever it may be, in a calm, wise way without confronting or conflicting with the other side. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. So Maureen has the next hand. Maureen.
We had a fantastic group. I had Hannah and Majid and Carlos, and we had a wonderful conversation about listening and how that can really impact. Carlos came up with a new term for me, gentle governance, which I think is really a very powerful way for us to think about. And Majid was fantastic in getting into some descriptions about how we might listen and respond in a different way. Just one quick funny story, because this is such a serious topic, but I was being interviewed this morning for a podcast, and the woman asked me, did I remember any conflict circumstances in being a woman in healthcare leadership? And I was laughing back to when I was 34 and a brand new CEO, and I was the only woman, the only nurse, and the only 34-year-old in the CEO group. But I remember walking into my first meeting, and it was all these guys sitting around this big fancy table. And one of the guys turned around to me and he said, "Honey, get me coffee." And I remember thinking, how I deal with this is going to shape my future. And so I thought for a moment, and then I said, "I'm happy to get you coffee. How do you take it?" And then I said, "And this afternoon when I want my coffee, you get me mine and I take it black." And everybody started laughing. And wow. I really found that humor sometimes can help to open the doors for a different kind of conversation.
That was a wonderful story. You remind me of, I heard on a radio program, just as we go to Dr. E. I don't know what your first name is, but you'll come to you next. But Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, worked with Desmond Tutu, and she was describing how Tutu would use humor as a tactic with some of the most, let's say, difficult individuals around the world, like Charles Taylor in Liberia was one example for you. So people who are up before the International Criminal Court, and he would disarm them with humor and then go in with the point he wanted to make, which I thought was a really fantastic observation. And you did the same. So there you go, Maureen, you and Desmond Tutu on a level. Dr. E. Tell us what the E is.
Yeah, it's unmuted. Well, I wasn't going to say this. I obviously can do better on my report. I'd probably have thrown the coffee over him, but never mind. What was going to say, psychological, going on from what Fred said, psychological safety, which we discussed as a group quite early on, would be one way to be able to sort of voice what you want to say in a group if you knew it was kind of a safe space and you can just discuss things, you know, which is quite healthy, because, you know, you need to be able to speak freely, really, you know, provided it's reasonable.
Thank you. I'm seeing various interesting things in the chat. Yeah, Rich, I don't know what to add to that. Do scroll up and down the chat, people. There's some wonderful stuff there. Bob, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Listen, I
come to you.
I have a technical trick that not everybody gets into the breakout room, so I get to sort of hang out with my little group. And we talked about all sorts of different things, but I asked a question that I think raised a smile or two, the concept of conflict and the link to sort of peace and I guess love. And I'd love sort of Amanda and others' take on this, but I've just lobbed in the word siblings. So there'll be many people on the call who have siblings. And both through that lens, but also as a paediatrician, one of the questions I adore getting children, young people to talk about is their siblings and their relationships with. And I'm interested, I guess the thing I've got curious about is how we utilize conflict with people we love, and in the concept of siblings who are absolutely sort of bound to and generationally bound to, but not in a parent-child relationship, and how that sort of conflict, love, peace triangle sort of plays out. Anyway, I'm just probably revealing a little bit too much about my childhood and the relationship I have with my wonderful sisters and brother. But anyway, that was just a thought and reflection that the wonderful group I was with got me and others thinking about.
So, Bob, I'm just going to mention something that came up in our group. So we had Sherry and Simone and Kath and Christopher. I feel I struck lucky with that quintet. And we were talking about how some leaders, and somebody said, is it particularly religious leaders, seem to conduct themselves with a kind of levity and poise that we thought might be grace. And so we looked up the definition of grace, which I have here in the chat. Here's one I prepared earlier. But this courteous goodwill stuck us as quite an interesting concept. And you know, we didn't really talk too much about this, but several times we come in this group back to religion. And perhaps less the faith part, but more the behaviour part. And we don't talk very much about religion in the UK. Don't know, which PM was it who said we don't do God? It was Tony Blair, wasn't it? Don't do God. But you know, what is it about a number of religions perhaps that have a theme of grace within them? And Hannah, you mentioned your Quakerism. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Well, actually, my research that I'm doing for my doctorate is looking at spiritual practices and looking at the phenomenon of change, because I'm a change comms practitioner. And in the workplace, we do it really badly. But there are so many other very human spiritual practices out there that just do change so beautifully and so naturally. And it's all about connections and yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment in my research. I'll share it with you at some point. But it is really interesting how that kind of rigid mechanical structure of a work, organisational structure is finds it very, very difficult, I think. So I think there is something in spirituality, in other practices that we can look at to inspire and to help us in some kind of unmovable organisations that we may find ourselves in.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. The time, Hannah, we've come back to you. You can have another word if you like, but it's 6:56, so I'd like to go to Luke and Amanda and you for the last words before Bob closes us off. So thank you, everyone.
I'll be very, very, very quick then. Your sibling question, I think, again, bringing it back to organisational piece, I think it's about a shared purpose. So your siblings and you have a shared purpose, so you have that psychological safety because you know what you're doing. And I think it's the same in organisations and organisational change. But I would like to hear more about your siblings. Thank you very much, everybody. Handing over to Luke.
Thank you very much. It's been a really enjoyable conversation. Had a great discussion with my group about fear, actually, was one of the things that came up. And conflict can generate fear, but also so can peace and the willingness to go for peace as well. And I think this is where this idea of organisational peace really becomes quite powerful, because it gives the permission to aim for processes without the fear that you can be peaceful and not have to encounter violence. And so I hope it's a powerful concept that can be found ways to give energy to live, to breathe in your workplaces. But thank you so much for today's discussion from so many perspectives.
Thank you, Luke.
I mean, I might just say from a Christian, I know it's not PC, but from a Christian point of view, it's the gospel of, I don't know where it's from, Matthew or could be in John, but Christ says, peace I give to you, peace I leave you. And the Bible talks about, and a lot of our law is based on Roman law and also the law that's in the Bible. So so a sort of a peace and a joy that actually isn't related to the circumstances that you happen to be in. And in terms of, like, I think you mentioned, Hannah, early on about sort of ill effects of conflict and so on, and it's very protective, because if you have a joy that can't be removed, it's very empowering. And a lot of the ways that are taught in the Bible, there's an answer to every single problem. It was, if you are someone that believes, that it was designed to last. No word that's in there is accidental. So I'm going to
with great reluctance, I'm going to pause there because the clock is really against us. Thank you very much. I still don't know what the E stands for. Tell us.
It's a Katerini. It's the Greek for
Katerini.
Yeah,
wonderful. Katerini, thank you so much for that. I want to go to Amanda, and in so doing, I do want to recommend the Dimbleby lecture that I've heard the first 10 minutes of, which someone put in the chat, and the Mission Joy thing looks great as well. Lots of resources. Where are you, Amanda?
I'm here. I don't think there's anything else for me to add. You'll be pleased as it is the hour, wherever you are, the hour, other than peace be with you. And
organisationally, familiarly and individually. Thank you, Amanda, Luke, Hannah, everybody. Bob.
Listen, we're on the hour. It's like the beeps. There's this, the famous institution on BBC Radio 4, and we're good at hitting that. Listen, all I'm going to say is thank you. To be continued. We have a great setup for April, we have a new friend who comes from the wonderful other side of the world and is going to get up very early from our behalf, called Matt. He's going to talk and pick up some of this, I think, idea around the human side of things, being human, and a conversation that feels very live. There's some wonderful stuff going on in the chat. I just want to draw attention as well to the research that you can all get involved with, that Anna's posted in. Do have a little go at that, and we'll send something around as well. As ever, this is recorded. We'll get something up on the website as and when we can. Have a lovely rest of your evening, your morning, whatever you've got ahead, and we'll catch you again in a month, I think on the 17th of April. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.